Story number 1. I'm Jenna, a nurse at Sunnyside Children's Hospital. My life was pretty routine until he showed up, Mr. Giggles, the clown. He started coming every Thursday, making balloon animals and telling jokes. The kids loved him. I thought he was a bit much, but hey, anything for the kids. One Thursday, Mr. Giggles was doing his usual rounds. Balloons, laughs, the works. But something felt off. He lingered too long in some rooms, his smile a bit too wide. I shrugged it off. I had more important things to worry about, like little Timmy's upcoming surgery. The next week, things got weirder. Mr. Giggles brought a new trick, a puppet. It was a creepy thing, all raggedy and old. He said it was named Charlie. The kids were uneasy, but Mr. Giggles insisted it was fun. I watched him pull the strings, making Charlie dance. That's when I noticed it, Charlie's eyes. They looked real, too real. After his show, I decided to do some digging. Who was Mr. Giggles, really? No one at the hospital knew much. He just showed up one day with a background check from some agency. I called the agency. Disconnected number, red flag number 1. I started watching Mr. Giggles closely. He had a pattern, room by room, joke by joke, but always with Charlie, that creepy puppet. And he always paused at room 211. Why? Room 211 was empty, has been for months. One night I stayed late. I wanted to see what Mr. Giggles did when the hospital was quiet. I hid near room 211. The clock ticked past midnight. Then I heard it, soft, shuffling footsteps. It was Mr. Giggles tiptoeing down the hall. He stopped at room 211, pulling out a key. Wait, a key? How did he have a key? I watched as he slipped inside. My heart was pounding. I had to know. I crept to the door, pressing my ear against it. Silence, then a low murmuring. Was he talking to someone? Or something? I pushed the door open, just a crack. The room was dark, but there was a faint glow from a flashlight. Mr. Giggles was there, all right. But he wasn't alone. Charlie, the puppet, sat on a small table, its head turned towards Mr. Giggles. He was talking to it, whispering things I couldn't hear. I needed to get closer. I inched the door open, stepping inside. The floor creaked. Mr. Giggles stopped talking. He turned slowly, his painted face twisting into a scowl. "Who's there?" he hissed. I bolted, running back to the safety of the nurse's station. My mind was racing. What was I going to do? Who would believe me? A clown talking to a puppet in the middle of the night. The next day I decided to confront him. I found Mr. Giggles in the playroom, surrounded by kids. I pulled him aside, demanding answers. "What were you doing in room 211 last night?" I asked. His smile faltered. "Just practicing my act," he said, but his eyes were darting around like he was looking for an escape. I didn't buy it. "And talking to your puppet? That's normal to you?" I pressed. He laughed, but it was hollow. "Charlie's a big part of the show, Jenna. You wouldn't understand." That night I had a plan. I was going to catch Mr. Giggles in the act, recorded on my phone. Proof. I waited in the dark, the silence of the hospital weighing heavy on me. Right on cue, Mr. Giggles appeared, heading for room 211. I followed, phone ready. This time I stayed back, recording from the hallway. I caught it all. Mr. Giggles talking to Charlie, saying things that made my skin crawl. Things about the kids, about what he wanted to do to them. My heart was pounding. I had him. I had to show this to someone, anyone. But then, something happened. Charlie's head turned, slowly, impossibly, to look right at me. Its eyes, those two real eyes, staring into mine. I gasped, dropping my phone. It clattered to the floor, the light from the screen illuminating the hallway. Mr. Giggles whirled around, spotting me. "You!" he snarled. I didn't wait. I ran, my breath ragged, my mind screaming. Behind me I could hear him, chasing me, his clown shoes slapping against the floor. I made it to the nurse's station, slamming the door shut, locking it. I was safe, for now. I called security, told them everything. They didn't believe me at first, but when they checked room 211, they found it. Charlie, the puppet, sitting there with those haunting human eyes. Mr. Giggles was gone, vanished into the night. The police came, took statements, but they never found him. The hospital was in an uproar. How could this happen? How did we let a madman walk among us? I quit not long after. I couldn't stand being in those halls knowing what had happened, knowing that Mr. Giggles was still out there somewhere. Story number 2. I always thought our neighborhood was safe, the kind where everyone knows each other and kids can play outside until the streetlights come on. But everything changed last summer. It was like any other hot afternoon, except Joey from 2 houses down didn't come home for dinner. His mom was frantic, asking everyone if they'd seen him. No one had. That was just the beginning. The next week, Lily, who's in my class, vanished too. Just poof, gone. The grown-ups whispered about it, looking worried. The police started patrolling more, but they didn't seem to have any clues. It was like these kids had vanished into thin air. Then Tommy said he saw something weird. A clown van, he called it. It was this old, beat-up van painted with bright, faded colors. Tommy said he saw it near the park, just sitting there. But when he got closer, it drove off real fast. He thought it was strange because who drives a clown van, right? But no one really believed him. I started feeling this chill in my stomach every time I walked home from school. My best friend Alex said I was being paranoid, but I couldn't shake the feeling. We started seeing that van too, lurking around corners, always just out of reach. It was like it was watching us. The police were trying, I guess, but it didn't seem like they knew what to do. Then, Mrs. Jacobs, our local detective, came into the picture. She was different, always asking questions and looking at things in a way no one else did. She seemed to think the van was important, but she needed proof. One evening, Alex and I were biking home, and we saw the van again. It was parked by the old playground, the one nobody goes to anymore. Alex wanted to check it out, but I had this bad feeling, like we were walking into a trap. But Alex was already pedaling towards it, so what could I do? We hid our bikes and sneaked closer. The van was super creepy up close, all rusty and covered in peeling stickers of clowns. The back door was slightly open. Alex looked at me, his eyes wide, and whispered, "Let's see if there's anything inside." My heart was pounding like crazy, but I didn't want to seem scared, so I nodded. We tiptoed to the van, and Alex peeked inside. He gasped and suddenly grabbed my arm, pulling me away. "Run!" he hissed. We ran as fast as we could, not stopping until we reached Alex's house. He was shaking. "I saw something," he panted. "Bags, like big duffel bags, and they were moving." We knew we had to tell Mrs. Jacobs. She listened to us, her face serious, and then she was on her phone, calling for backup or something. She told us to stay put, that it was dangerous, but Alex and I couldn't just sit around. We had to do something. So we went back. I know, stupid, right? But those kids were our friends. We had to try. We kept our distance, hiding behind a bush. The van was still there, and now Mrs. Jacobs was there too, with some other police. They approached the van, guns drawn. My heart felt like it was in my throat. Then, all hell broke loose. The back of the van burst open, and this guy in a clown mask jumped out, running. The police chased after him. Mrs. Jacobs was yelling into her radio. It was chaos. Alex and I crept closer, and that's when we heard it. Muffled cries coming from the van. We didn't think. We just rushed to the van and yanked the doors wide open. Inside, there were bags, just like Alex said, and inside them were kids, including Joey and Lily. They were scared and crying, but alive. We helped them out, just as Mrs. Jacobs came back. She had caught the clown guy. Turns out, he was just some nut job who lived a few blocks away, someone no one ever noticed. He had this crazy idea of starting his own circus and thought kidnapping. Kids was the way to do it. Sick, right? It was all over the news the next day. Mrs. Jacobs was a hero, and Alex and I got mentioned too. The neighborhood threw a big party, and everyone was so happy and relieved. but I couldn't stop thinking about that van and those scared faces. Things went back to normal, sort of. Parents became more watchful, and the police still patrol our streets, but kids play outside again, and there are no more missing posters on the lampposts. Story number 3. As a therapist, I've always believed in facing fears head-on. That's why I started a support group for people with a fear of clowns. Coulrophobia, it's called. I never thought clowns were scary, just guys in makeup and funny shoes. But my patients, they felt differently. Real terror in their eyes when they talked about clowns. Our group met every Wednesday night in my cozy office. Dim lights, soft chairs, a circle of trust. There was Tim, a burly guy who went pale at the mention of circuses. Sarah, a young woman who couldn't even look at pictures of clowns. And others, all with their own stories. We talked, we shared, we tried to understand their fear. One night, Sarah came in shaken. She said she saw a clown standing under a streetlight near her house. No circus in town, no party nearby, just a clown, staring. We thought it was her fear playing tricks. I advised her to confront these visions, to remind herself it wasn't real. The next week, Tim said he saw a clown in a parking lot, just watching him. His voice quivered as he described the oversized shoes, the too bright red nose. We talked it out, rationalizing it as stress or imagination. But then, more of us started seeing them. Clowns, in places they shouldn't be. A silent figure at a bus stop in the pouring rain. A shadowy form in a grocery store aisle. Always watching, never approaching. It was during a session talking about these sightings that we heard it. Faint at first. The sound of circus music, distant but distinct. It sent shivers down my spine. We checked outside, nothing. No cars, no speakers, just the cold, quiet night. The group was on edge, members dropping out, too scared to leave their homes. I couldn't blame them. I started seeing the clowns too, in my dreams at first. Then, one evening while driving home, I saw one. It stood by the roadside, its painted face illuminated by my headlights, just smiling. I told myself it was a prank, some sick joke, but the fear in my heart felt real. The circus tune haunted my nights, a merry jingle turned sinister. The remaining few in the group decided we had to do something. We couldn't live like this, haunted by our fears made flesh. We decided to confront it, together. If these were just pranks, we'd expose them. If not, well, we didn't let our minds wander to if not. We chose a spot where Tim had seen a clown, an old parking lot, empty and quiet. We stood there, under the dim glow of streetlights, waiting. The night air was chilly, our breaths fogging up. Hours passed. Nothing. Just when we started to relax, thinking it was indeed all in our heads, the circus music started. Softly creeping into our ears. We looked around, panic rising. And then, from the shadows, figures emerged. Clowns, not one, not two, but a whole group. Their faces twisted in grotesque smiles, makeup smeared. They didn't speak, just moved closer, their oversized shoes scuffing the ground. We stood frozen, terror gripping us. This was real, too real. They circled us, their smiles never wavering. The music grew louder, drowning our heartbeats. Then, as sudden as it began, the music stopped. The clowns, they just vanished, as if they were never there. We were alone again, the silence deafening.